That's all I want. Leave the past behind and fly without fear. Return to you, where love blooms. In your arms I find peace. I find peace, 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 peace. Back to you, to you, to you. Back to you. Back to you. I find peace.
Hello.
Hello. So that the music was a little dicey at first, but I think it came around.
Yeah, for anyone asking, I asked Steph if we were, drawing people into a cult tonight.
It's a little subliminal messaging.
Yeah, we're drawing people into like the cult of quilt history books. Speaking of books, we always gotta get it going with like the little announcements.
Yeah,
Do you have our next one sitting next to you, perhaps?
I do. It's right here in my handy dandy book area.
The floor.
No, it's the stack on the floor.
I can't see the title very well from here. Can you read that out?
Sorry. It is To Honor and Comfort Native Quilting Traditions.
And in our last week's video, I had gotten some affiliate links for that, and then obviously I'll re-jazz the description when we're done here in case you guys need to get yourself a copy. And then for next week, we're gonna finish Mary Kay's book here. So it's going to be Looking for Better Times conclusion, and then there's interesting stuff in the back. So you might want to look at like the appendix, the notes, the glossary. The bibliography is always a really great place to look, just saying. So yeah,
And
that's
there's
what
a few fun patterns in case you want to whip up any one of these by the end of the week.
yeah. Hey, Steph, can you type out the title in the chat?
Oh, yes. Yes. Hey, Arlene, by the way.
So yes, we're doing that for next week, and then our live interview with Mary Kay will be on October 1st at 7 p.m. Eastern. Assuming between now and then we don't have any scheduling conflicts. And then tomorrow at 7 p.m. is our Needlework Nights, and we're going to be talking about Mauchline sewing items. So you will want to be around for that. And then I don't think there's anything else major, is there?
I don't think so.
We haven't picked any other dates yet for any more like seminar stream things, so stay tuned because on Thursday I'm heading up to Maine for a few days. So I won't be around to do stuff.
We'll
So
get to it.
That means, Steph, you have to talk about something other than seminar on Thursday on your stream.
It's quite all right. I have plenty. I have whole piles on my desk of things to talk about. So yeah, no worries. We'll get back to seminar.
It's like the seminar that never ends because of how much stuff we have from that to discuss.
I know, and I think all the stuff we have to show is only like a fraction of the whole experience, but you know, we've just got so much.
And we still feel like we didn't get enough. Yeah, I think it was like Friday night when I poked Stephanie and was like, oh my God, we have to like take picture and video. And her and I at the same time were like, oh crap. Like,
I know. And I realized like I had not taken very many pictures at that point of things that we can show. I had taken some pictures at the Newark, but they were really for my own personal.
Well, and then we realized today that we didn't take any pictures with like any friends.
Right. There's
like,
a picture of you and me, and that's it.
Yeah, we didn't take a picture with Ann Hermes, who was there. We didn't even take a picture with Mary Kay, who was there.
Right.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah. Well, we promised to do better.
Yeah. Anywho, all right.
One thing that I do have to promise to do better of is I had promised that I would have the entry form for our soft covers for Hard Times giveaway, and I dropped the ball on that and remembered literally 5 minutes before we jumped on here. So I will have that ready to go tonight. And really I wanted to do it this way because I know sometimes it's difficult. Like we could have you like, you know, post yourself with the book and tag and all that stuff. But because this is not a recent book that was released, you know, I don't know that Mary Kay is necessarily looking for, you know, the notoriety. So what I was going to do is just have, you know, the sign up form so that people who are watching this after the fact, you know, will be able to enter. You know, you don't have to be here to win, you know. So, and we'll do the drawing on the day of Mary Kay's interview. Did you say is that October 1st?
Mm-hmm.
1st, yeah. So we'll do the drawing then. But in the meantime, we will post the link to our Facebook group, and then I'll share the link again next week, so that just in case you forget to check. So
I was going to say, don't forget that you have to be the one to put a link in the chat because
yes, I do.
Yeah. Hi, Jan and Janet.
Hey guys.
All right. Well, otherwise,
are we ready to get to it?
I'm ready to get to it. There's a lot of interesting things to talk about tonight.
Yeah.
Um,
So I know one thing that I know we had finished with the and or section, but I did want to note that I can't remember if we said this or not. But the nosegay, this particular quilt,
yeah.
it was not an and or quilt. And Mary Kay had called that out, and I think that we forgot to mention that, or at least I didn't remember mentioning it.
Oh,
It's an example of an and or inspired quilt. And I remember we talked a lot about a particular quilt that was in the auction, the live auction, the AQSG
yeah.
live auction, and how they had it kind of noted as an and or quilt, and Mary Kay was like, no, it's a and or inspired quilt.
Mhm.
So I feel like there's a lot of that, that people were inspired by and or, but created things that were similar. Anyway, so the National Quilt Contest.
I was like, you know far more about this and have
Yeah.
talked far more about it than I ever have.
Yeah. So yeah, I have to say I learned a lot about the contest, both from reading this book, from
Mhm.
reading Mary Kay and Barbara Brockman's book about the quilt contest, and from doing my own research because Dr. Dunton went to the quilt show. So
Okay, I thought there was
yeah,
something.
like I said, everything quilt oriented, I can bring Dr. Dunton into it. Sometimes it's a 6 degrees of separation situation, but all roads lead back to Dunton. But yeah, so that's why I kind of had immersed myself in some of this information last year. And so it's not new discoveries for me, but it's fun to read it. And there are a few little things in here that I'd forgotten about, because I think I had read this chapter. I mean, this book I read quite a while ago, but pretty sure I'd read this chapter before I read her and Barbara's book.
Mhm.
So there were some little bits and pieces in here that I was kind of like, oh, yeah, I forgot about that. Or I didn't remember seeing that. So anyway, in a nutshell, this was a big deal, as you probably have gathered from reading this chapter. We're talking about a prize of up to $1,000, which is big money during the Depression.
It would be big money now.
Well, yeah. Oh,
I would
yeah,
not be upset
absolutely.
winning $1,000 now.
Exactly. Same. Absolutely same. But I mean, can you imagine during the Depression? Like that is life-changing money right
Mhm.
there. And that there were 24,000 quilts entered into this contest.
And
And
also the fact that they were only given 6 months.
yeah. Oh
Like
yeah, that's the other piece of it.
6 months now would be considered like the rudest turnaround time for like a major contest like that. Can
Well,
you imagine if people
for
are doing it by hand?
a bed-size quilt, definitely.
Mhm.
I do feel like, like for QuiltCon and stuff, there are some of the quilt challenges where they really don't get a whole lot of time. Like I think the community project ones where you have like a guild making a quilt, and some of like the smaller ones, you do have less than a year on those. But yeah, I mean, it is a lot to ask of somebody.
Well, and especially during a time period where information travels much more slowly than it does now. They didn't put this big blast out on Instagram, like you had to wait for the paper or the
No,
this
but
or the
it
that.
was in the Instagram of the day, which was the newspaper. So, I mean, I think it was something where, like, yes, you're absolutely right. Like, it wasn't something that was like being right on somebody's phone right then. But I do think that it was pretty well known, this contest, because, I mean, back then everybody read the paper, right? You know?
I don't know. I
Yeah,
don't
they
know.
did.
I don't know.
I could pretty confidently say yes, they did. They read the newspaper. If they, most people got the newspaper and they read it. That was their main form of news. But yeah, it's amazing that there were so many entries to this, and
We wouldn't even get that many today.
yeah, I mean, you think, I mean, I've heard the stories out of QuiltCon and the absolute volume of quilts that they get and why it's, I mean, you often, well, I mean, there's the whole category of, the QuiltCon rejects that are on Instagram every year, when
Mhm.
they make the decisions. And yeah, like, you know, as many people as there are in that, I don't think it's anywhere near, you know, 24,000 people or, you know, some subset of that. I think they really had a good plan together. The way that I read this, you know, they had the
Yeah.
stores that picked winners, and then they did a regional thing, and then
Mhm.
because I mean, can you imagine 24,000 quilts rolling into like Sears headquarters? What a nightmare. Um, I feel like though, I want to say it's in their Patchwork Souvenirs book, which is the book about this contest, you know, this whole thing. I think there's a picture of like a mountain of paper wrapped packages tied up
Mhm.
with string, like
Mhm.
with the Sears guys. Maybe I've made that up, but if anybody is familiar with that book,
I have the book, but I haven't read it.
yeah, I don't have it within arm's reach right now. So, um, yeah, if, you guys probably know if you've seen it. But anyway, I just think this was such an interesting um phenomenon, right? And there was so much controversy out there about it, right?
Well, while like the way that they organize the picking of winners is very organized, I would be a little sus about like people picking winners at like the store level, because like who's picking those winners? And when I just think about all the store managers in retail that I worked with over the years, which is many because they didn't never last long. If I ever found out that those men, they were almost all men, were picking out quilt winners, uh that would be rife for bribery and corruption and like things like that. So I'm just like,
Sure. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know, it wasn't really clear to me like at the store and mail order outlet like who was doing the choosing, but she did say in here um the people at least at the regional level,
Mhm.
those you know area level, those people were
A little more
let's see,
legit.
yeah, the Nashville judges were a designer and an interior decorator, a prominent club woman active in historical preservation, and I highlighted this because I want to know this. Mrs. Claude Waller, who was one of the Nashville judges, was a beautification advocate. What do
Yes,
you think
Janet
that means?
says
What do you think a beautification advocate is?
that like everything should be just for pretty. Like,
I don't know. I picture her as being like one of those people that is the person in the homeowners association that goes around and like measures everybody's flowers. Like, you cannot have flowers any shorter or taller
so
or
it's like the very beginning of the evolution of the HOA.
maybe, I don't know. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, people were absolutely desperate for the money. And yeah, Sears. Well, I mean, that's the thing. We joke about when we were talking about the privy bags and
Mhm.
stuff. We were joking about, you know, the Sears catalog. Everybody had a Sears catalog to the point where they wiped their rear with it the following year.
And then went like, oh look, there's a quilt contest. Let me wipe that off.
I missed that. Um, but
Janet,
yeah,
of
that
course I'm gonna say sus. I'm a millennial.
so
Barb said Lady Bird Johnson was a beautification advocate, not always a bad thing. Barb, do you know what a beautification advocate
I
is?
mean, yes, I'm very tongue in cheek here because I'm
Yeah,
like,
because we
I
don't
don't know
know what
what
it
that
is.
is.
Um, I guessed it was a just for pretty person who is just like things should be pretty. Like, um,
Um, I mean, maybe it is like making things look better. Like we've got this ugly concrete, like whatever, and let's make it look better. Or people are living in a shanty town. Let's get them some flowers in front of theirs. I don't know. I mean, when I think about like beautification projects in small towns, like the little town I live in, I mean, we're a tiny little dot in a county. And we do have a historical preservation society and a chamber of commerce that pays attention to those things. And, like the street lights and the sidewalks and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I think that's part of beautification. So, Yeah, I mean, I'm being very tongue-in-cheek here, but
Because it's an odd term by
yeah, it's a
today's
funny term.
standard.
It really feels like a made-up term. Um, so I have to say that so Rebecca Ward DeWitt, I love her quilt. The Lily of the Valley is so fabulous.
Janet said Ladybird had us throwing pill capsules out our car windows, planting wildflowers along the roads of the USA. I mean, that would be a pretty good initiative for like remember when there were all those initiatives for like Save the Bees and like we need like wildflowers for bees and stuff.
Yeah.
That would be,
Well,
everybody.
yeah, I mean, that is a beautification project on like so what the highway system wasn't that old at that point. What a highway system was that Eisenhower? I'm super bad with my parents' history.
Hi, Kristen.
Kristen. So this is the Lily of the Valley, and they I think they have it listed. Sears had it listed as a bride quilt, but Mary Kay said in here that they're pretty sure it's this particular quilt, this Lily of the Valley quilt. I love this quilt so much. I think it is like so.
It gives me dogwood quilt kit vibes.
Yeah,
Like that's
yes,
kind of how I feel about it.
indeed. But it feels like just you say pretty things from the 1930s, and it's like you've got that green, that very 1930s green, and it's just Lilies of the Valley remind me of my grandmother. It's just like, I don't know, that quilt just like really speaks to me, and I keep turning back to this page and looking at it again.
Well, one little like side note that Mary Kay put in here was that many of the quilts from this chapter were from Tennessee who entered the contest but didn't win. And then just because it was on the previous page, she did point out all the machine quilting that was on this Century of Progress quilts. And it's funny, at first because this doesn't, the actual like info about this quilt is on 43, where it's 71 by 92 cotton, cream sateen back, machine quilting in 1/2-inch squares in applique blocks and 1/4-inch apart parallel lines and sashing using white thread. When I looked at this, I did not automatically assume machine quilting. And then when I went back, I was like, wow, that's kind of what people are doing now with some of the more really simplistic kind of machine quilting that's really, really dense and adds a lot of texture. And then I'm sitting here, this is one of the things that made me think about having like I'm assuming store managers or whatever at the store level picking out winners, because remember it's I forget what page it's on, but there was complaints made based on the things that they asked for, that none of these Century of Progress quilts made it into the finalists. They were just honorable mention, even though the call basically said they'd give preference to quilts and then to come up with all this kind of specialized applique and stuff, again, in that 6-month period, to really make a concept and see it through.
Yeah, and like I feel their pain. As an art quilter, like I totally feel that. Like, yeah, I know that you wouldn't necessarily put my quilt on a bed, but like, what's wrong with it design wise? You didn't say, like, the rule isn't it's got to be a quilt that's beautiful on a bed. Like, it, and the fact that they had this like call to action to make these specific types of quilts, like, yeah, I feel their pain. And some of those quilts were really cool.
Yeah. Marilyn, she says, "Hi girls, I ordered the book from Abe Books, and when it arrived, it was a signed copy purchased from Mary Kay in 2000. That was a really nice treat." That's really exciting.
Nice.
Wait a minute. I didn't even look. Wait, is mine? Nope.
No, I know mine is not. I
and
want
you
to
know
say
what?
though,
I had mine with me at seminar. Did I have Mary Kay sign it? No, of course I didn't.
I meant to bring mine and then totally forgot.
Oh, yeah, I totally brought mine. But you know, once you get there, your head just explodes, and
Yeah, for sure.
there's nothing else there. But yeah, and actually, did it say, are these hand applique?
What the
It doesn't
what's her name?
say. The Century Progress. It doesn't say if it's hand applique.
Samantha Wise's quilt.
Yeah, it just says
Um,
machine quilted, but doesn't say hand
I would
applique.
assume that it is hand applique. Let me get the picture. The picture, it doesn't, I mean, it's not super up close detail, but to me they look hand applique because they're very smooth along the edge. There's no like, usually with the machine applique, you'll see like that little edge stitch.
Arlene said her copy's also signed, and then Janet says that we both need assistance. Janet, are you volunteering? Like, just be careful. If if you put it out there in the universe, we might just call you to action. But yes, at seminar, because Stephanie and I were on the committee and we were very heavily involved in things, we definitely could have used assistance. That's for sure.
So for anybody who missed my stream yesterday, where we talked about we showed off the vendors area at seminar, page 45, we showed yesterday, you should recognize this quilt as one almost identical to it was in Zania Cord's booth.
Yeah.
The only difference is, I'll hold this up because I didn't grab the picture. In Zania's quilt, the little pink corner
is white, so it's not
squares
a straight
are white, so it ends up looking, this doesn't look so square, it looks almost like a petal because with that little one point missing, it gives it a rounded look. Otherwise it is identical, like same color of like that dusty rose and pink. And I just was like, when you noticed it, you were like, I cannot believe this, after I saw this quilt and I remembered I'd seen it, and I was just like, that always makes my head go.
Yeah, it blew my mind because and the stream that Steph is talking about is, we did a dual stream, so it's also on our last live video. It says like a quilt nerding extra, and there's a 2 on it for part 2 of some of our stuff. I had sat and talked with Zania for a while specifically about that quilt in her booth because she was sitting like right next to it. I had never seen that pattern before. Not that it's not out there. It's just, I'm not as seen as many
it's
as
it's a lesser known and/or.
And Zania said, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, she had not come across it either. It was the only time she'd had one. And it was very, very cool. One of the reasons is because of that border is so striking. Especially compared to the patchwork is very simplistic. And then you just end up with this just the pow kind of border.
Yeah, it's got a lot of impact.
The more we talk about it, the more I'm like,
why did I buy that quilt?
Yeah, should I call Zania? Like,
it's a really striking quilt, and it's a very cool quilt. What I love about this is, I guess Inez Ward was still alive when Mary Kay wrote the book, and in here it's documented when she received the news that she had won first place in Memphis, the regional Memphis prize. She went to tell her husband and her father, because they were out in the field, and they came in and were like, no more plowing today. This is such good news. I was just like, aw, how sweet.
I also didn't know, because again, I probably didn't notice that this was, it's called a Lincoln quilt.
Yes.
Which, do you know off the top of your head any of the background behind? No. Yeah, I don't know.
I can't remember.
Not my jam either, but I'm like,
Yeah. I don't think Zania had any real specifics other than that it was the Lincoln quilt and it was Anor, right?
I'd have to go back and look. But I think so. Can we just come back for a second here? Page 40 talks about the winning quilt.
Oh yeah.
and how it had been presented to Eleanor Roosevelt in 1933, and then that it had disappeared since then. Is that still the case? Do you know?
Yeah, as far as I know, it has still never been found. And I
Interesting.
think that, you know, I mean, you could come up with all kinds of stories, but my guess is, I mean, Eleanor Roosevelt, so I've read different things about Eleanor Roosevelt. Like I think she found it very valuable. You know, women were doing handwork, and she was, you know, such a supporter of the WPA efforts and all that stuff. But I think in terms of like being gifted a textile, she could not have cared less.
Oh.
That was what I had heard. And it kind of was like she did the photo, because there's like that very famous photo of her, you know, having it presented to her. Florence Pito was there. And I think it was that one. Now I'm thinking I might be saying this from the wrong event, but in the event, it was presented to her, and she was like, "Oh, thank you very much." And there's this, you know, her being gracious and whatnot. And then it was like the quilt was whisked away by somebody and like never seen again. My guess is either during the Roosevelt administration or when they left the White House, somebody took it. You know.
Well, it also made me just
took it to
think
the White House.
like, is there any chance it's just like in some weird closet in the White House and has just kind of lost?
You know, I mean, I mean, that would be a wonderful thing to hope and assume, but I would say that, and I mean, this is just knowing what I know about the security of Washington, D.C., and my mother, you know, worked in D.C. When one family leaves and another family comes in, they do a lot of kind of, not renovation necessarily, but they do kind of like redecorate everything. And so like anywhere where the family spends time in the White House would definitely, like, every corner of it would have been looked at, you know?
So what I think though about like,
Now the basement of the White House, who knows?
well, because the one thing I'm thinking is like, you're totally right, where, you know, obviously like things are constantly like cycling out, especially if you consider like short terms in the White House and not a full 8 years. But I also was thinking, you know, I'm assuming many people here have watched Friends, but maybe not. But in an episode of Friends, Monica Geller, who is obsessively cleans all the time, it is discovered that she has a crap closet.
I love the
I'm
crap
like,
closet episode.
yeah, I'm like, I wouldn't be surprised. A place as big as the White House, there has got to be at least
A
one
crap closet.
where someone was like, what do I do with this? I don't know. Here, put it in, you know what I mean? So now that being said, I mean, I don't know the answer because I've never looked into any of this, but you've read far more than me. Has anyone asked the White House?
Yeah, you know, that's a question I kind of have often thought of myself is, you know, in this divisive a day and age, I don't know that that's necessarily like, I think you'd be harder pressed to find somebody that would help you. But
There
I feel
isn't
like
like a
over the
curator, like the Queen, you know, always had, you
Yeah,
know,
I mean, that's the thing. There's got to be somebody, because I mean, the parts of the White House are open to the public
and they
during
have
different times.
historic paintings and
Yeah, and
furniture there.
so exactly. So yes, they have to have a person who's responsible for that. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's entirely possible that there is some crap closet in the White House or the
I
attic
think it's
or the
very
basement.
highly probable. Now, whether or not there's a quilt in there, fine.
know.
But like there has got to be a crap closet.
Those things possibly go to the Smithsonian. Yeah, I mean, that this is something that you think would have. But I mean, again, think about the fact that it's given in 1933 and it was probably like just whisked away in 1933. It wasn't like it sat around, you know.
No, maybe, but
yeah, I
I'm
don't
just
know.
thinking through now. I have not, while I do kind of consider myself, I guess, like kind of a baby historian, I almost consider myself a baby like armchair historian, where I'm mostly just like soaking up things like a plant. Stephanie has done like hardcore like research in lately. So in listening to you talk with people like Merikay and others of our friends that have done hardcore research, it seems to me that it is quite common to find stuff that a museum has just and forgotten about.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you know, when you said closet, I'm immediately think of, you know, Mary Fawn's her research on
Bertha.
Bertha Mextra,
Mhm.
that her quilts were at a college, and you know, they were, I guess, treasured when they first went there, perhaps, or maybe never treasured. People may have been like, why do we have these dang quilts? And they were put in a closet.
Mhm.
Yes. And it was one of the nuns at the college, because I think it was a religious college. So yeah.
So yeah, it just makes me wonder, like, and I just got
Yeah.
a text. Oh, Mary Kay says, yes, we've asked everyone official at the White House, Roosevelt
Okay.
libraries, etc. We've checked letters, correspondence, nothing.
Yeah. That's what I thought. And I think that's why somewhere along the line, and I don't think it's Mary Kay specifically, but somewhere along the line, somebody had said in some conversation I overheard that it was gathered that like the quilt didn't stick around. Like the Roosevelts didn't like drape it over the, you know, they didn't put it on the bed. They didn't
So
drape it
like
over,
someone
you know.
took it like from the presentation.
Yeah, like that's how it seemed. Like that's what I read into what was said about it.
Yeah,
And
she just
yeah.
said there's more info in Patchwork Souvenirs.
Yeah, and yes, and that there is more info in there. And I feel like I just remember hearing that, you know, it's and that they had sort of pounded the pavement to try and find it. And yes, it does not surprise me that Barbara Brackman and Mary Kay and their their army of cohorts that helped them with the research are not like on the phone going, I don't know what year was, I don't remember what year they wrote the other book. You know, I know this book is what,
1990.
90 something, 1990. Yeah, so like what we're talking on, we're not, that's not Clinton administration yet. So yeah, they probably wrote the other book, Clinton administration. So, hi, can I speak to Hillary? Do you know what this quilt is? I
Are
know
you
that
kidding?
Mary
They
Kay
wouldn't
and
have called on the phone. They would have knocked on the door.
well, Mary
She
Kay and Barbara
also,
are known to have gone to DC and knocked on doors.
yes,
So
she also said, we think Eleanor knew about the scandal with the first prize winner, and Eleanor wanted to deep six it. Deep
yeah,
six.
and I was about to say the scandal about the winner, I didn't know if that like how far and wide that got like immediately, and perhaps yeah, if it was immediately like this woman won $1,000 and people were like foul, makes a lot of sense that yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, I was to say we
one
digressed so badly.
yeah, well, this is like
Oh,
this topic is so interesting.
Carolyn said, hi, Hillary, can you dig through the crowd closet in the White House and see if you find it? Well, Carolyn, that you just won like the funniest comment that like
Yeah.
has ever been so far. But yeah, like Hillary, do me a solid. Get in that crowd closet. Like,
Can I come by and help clean out the crap closet at the White House?
well, and then she comes back on the phone. Which one? Like which crowd closet? There's multiples. And then Mary Kay
Oh
just
my
said
God.
it's well known in Kentucky. Like I'm assuming she means the scandal. And then Mary Kay also said, I love the idea of a crap closet. See, Mary Kay, new avenues of research arise when we discuss the books.
Indeed, indeed.
All right, moving on.
So, two things I'd like to wrap up with. Well, three things actually. So to point out this little booklet,
Yep.
that booklet is in Dr. Dutton's collection. There's a copy of it.
Did
This
you tell
booklet
me
pissed
that?
Dr. Dutton off. Probably it was in my, I think it was probably in my
Yeah.
my lecture about Dutton, but
Mhm.
yes, he was upset. And this booklet was what spurred him to be connected with Sue Roberts, who is right here. She's the younger woman that's right there in the picture. And there's a whole interesting thing. Sue Roberts is a whole other rabbit hole to fall down, and I fell down. And even though my research was not about her, I could not help myself. She's very interesting. I will not spend any more time on that. But
Thanks
I like
a lot,
this question.
Stephanie.
We'll talk about it another time. I like this question here. This is on page 46, where she says, therefore the question, well, so most judges are decorators, artists, and designers. Therefore, the question is, who is the best judge of quilts? A designer, an artist, or a quilt maker?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I think that's a question that we ask today. You know, I know QuiltCon, people that judge for QuiltCon are not always quilt makers.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they are, sometimes
Mm-hmm.
they're not. So that's an interesting question.
Well, and at the bare minimum, I can say that a person that I think is not a good quilt judge is a retail store manager. Like,
The manager of Sears.
Having known many of them, like.
All right. So the interviews, hard times quilt making. I love these. And it, you know, just hearing Mary Kay talk about some of this stuff, I think she probably, well, I think the interviews, if I may speak for you, Mary Kay, the interviews were probably your favorite part of writing this book. Being able to gather the oral history from these ladies. And I think this is my favorite part, is just reading about them, you know, sharing their memories.
Mm-hmm.
The first one I love was Georgia Mize, who said that, you know, she started piecing, she'd have to tear it out, she'd have to start over, but she made quilts for the cats. Love that. That was so sweet. I was like, aw.
Mary Kay also points out that in interviewing here about string quilts, she knew next to nothing about them at the time. And she also just she answered you, and she said yes, sitting with them was part of her favorite.
Yeah.
And then I had a couple of what page? Sorry, I have like Mary Kay's notes, I have my notes, I have all these notes.
Yeah, I know, me too.
Sorry, you were saying while I look for what I was looking for.
Yeah, so on page 52, there's just things that like just popped out to me that I just loved reading. So like on page 52,
Mm-hmm.
where, let's see, Ruth Reed's family? Because her brothers were carpenters, her grandfather was a furniture maker. So her family would trace their patterns on sandpaper.
Mm-hmm.
Which is brilliant. I mean, I remember my mother, you know, not because she had to, but because it's actually kind of useful. Like, it's a good technique to trace your patterns on sandpaper.
My mom did that.
Because they won't shift. The sandpaper grabs the fabric. Yeah. Or you glue some cardboard to the back of it or something. She had like metal templates that had sandpaper on them.
On page 57, and I mean, we can bounce around a little bit here, but in talking about gathering cotton for batting, Georgia Mize remembers that in the winter we would sit in front of the fire and get the cotton warm. The seeds came out easier that way. And I'm sitting here with our like cotton batting project going.
Well, here's my thoughts about that. It's possible, yes. Like, you know, I mean, I would imagine that, I mean, there is oil in cotton seeds. I mean, you know, maybe the warmth would kind of make the seeds slicker or something. But here's my thought. I think it's probably cotton seeds are easier to pull out of cotton bolls when your fingers are warm.
Why do you have to just like ruin my life like that?
Well, you know what, Jill? You do you. Go build a fire, make your batting. But I was gonna
say, like what would you say if we were doing like a stitch and bitch, and I had a little space heater here, and I'm like, oh, I'm removing seeds from my cotton, and you're like, how are you doing that? I'm like, there's a heater right here. Swoop, swoop. Like the way that I would see it is almost like your skin or something, the way like heat would make things, you know, expand. Like the fibers might expand, or at the base where it gets absolutely. Like, you know, like where it's, you know, I don't know, adhered to the cotton, maybe that expands a little bit so that it's easier to pull off.
It's entirely possible. Like, I'm not saying like I don't believe her. I just also think like the idea of handling something that's warm and sitting by the fire when you don't have central heat.
Yeah, well, it's also like, did they come out easier because just she was warm?
Yeah, but I mean, really think about it. If you've ever been so cold and your fingers are stiff from like being out cold and you kind of fumble, you know, if you don't have your mittens on. Yeah, that was my thought. And I had highlighted that also because I thought that was interesting. On the same page, next column, she says, also Georgia Mai says, my mother did a lot of fan quilting. My great grandmother, my mom said every single one of her quilts was Baptist fan quilted. So my guess is it's easier to make those arcs with a string and chalk
Oh yeah,
than
yeah.
it is to like try to get something straight if you don't have anything longer than say just like a, yardstick. It's, it's difficult to get straight lines. So that makes sense that it would be really easy to get that fan pattern, like just all over the quilt.
I also have to say, like, because we were talking about the cotton and her making bats and stuff, I obviously have yet to like, like make a full-on bat and like quilt through it. But there's something about quilts that have those homemade thin bats in them that feel cozier to me than commercialized batting. I don't know what it is, because often like the batting is like thinner, and now it makes sense to me when I saw in here on page it was,
is it in her interview with Viola Webb, I think.
It's page 52 where Georgia Swanner, I think it is, said that in the country you could sleep under 4 or 5 quilts in one of those old houses. And it's and that blurb there really struck me because it's always seems to be a topic of conversation among people that don't study much about, this kind of history. They're often always like, well, why did they need so many quilts? Like, why wouldn't they just stop making, 1 or 2? Why were they always making quilts? Why was it always this big thing? And that's because we're looking at it through the lens of a quilt you have today that has a very heavy bat in it. It's stiffer. And you might not, there are definitely nights right now, because I am the kind of person that has the window open in the winter with a fan on, that I will sleep under 2 quilts because I love that feeling of weight. But in terms of like sleeping with 2 because you need to create that much warmth, I found that very interesting. And then Mary Kay also said, when I was talking to Georgia, I was sitting right beside the very fireplace she sat next to. She also said she filled up an old boot with the seeds. Her mom told her to sit still and seed the cotton.
I love that. Oh my gosh. Those are, like those kind of stories are just like, I think there's probably some sense of fondness, that the women would tell these stories. Yeah. So to bounce back a little bit, 52, page 52, where Ruth Reed talks about getting the pattern in the mail, and she had like an order form for pre-cut pieces, but like, that was too expensive. That absolutely, the way she describes cutting out color strips out of a catalog and then going to JCPenney, and that sounds exactly like my grandmother. That's the kind of stuff my grandmother would have done. It just, I like really.
So my grandmother didn't quilt. I don't know that she did anything like craft related. If she did, it doesn't survive, at least not in my mother's possession. So I'm just curious, like for me, reading a lot of these stories, while I love them and they make me feel warm and cozy, it doesn't remind me of someone. Does it remind you, like, do you feel like you're reading about your grandmother?
Yeah. Well, my grandmother and her family, because there's some stuff I know, and one of the things they talked about, I don't think it was Viola's interview, but talking about growing up in a mill town. Oh, Sarah Rayleigh, growing up in a textile mill town, and all this stuff she talked about, I was like, oh my God, yeah. And honestly, thinking about the geography of like Tennessee, essentially there was like a mountain range between where my grandmother was and where some of these women were. They were very close. So you kind of got people on either sides of these mountains living kind of similar lives. And so there was a lot of stuff in these descriptions that I've heard my grandmother talk about, or she attributed like to her mother. As an example, page 60, where they talk about, when I asked about the hard times, Lois Hall told me what women did to come up with cash. People had chickens, but no money. That's my and then when it says for 2 eggs, you could get a tablet and pencil. My grandmother would take the eggs to get pencils for herself and her siblings. She would go buy pencils with eggs. And raising turkeys, a few turkeys to buy shoes, like that kind of stuff, like absolutely. Very similar stories. And Ruth Reed is the one who said, I feel fortunate to have lived in hard times. It makes me appreciate the conveniences we have today. And if you think about people that kind of take everything for granted, like they don't have a concept of what it means to live without something. Their sense of gratitude, I think, is just different than, say, for people that have experienced some type of, neglect or lack of resources. That's just like a very, oh gosh, what's the word I'm looking for? I think that's humility is really important. It's a really important quality, I think, for people to have. And I think if you have not faced some type of like need, like your basic needs, not like, I didn't get to go to Europe this summer, but like actual need, like we may not have enough food for breakfast, that kind of thing, that it creates a sense of humility that's a lot different than, people that have always had what they need. So,
well, and speaking of that kind of hardship creating like a humility in things, it also, on the same page, creates community. So, like when you got, this is one of the coolest fundraising quilts I've ever seen.
I love this quilt. This one's very cool. And Mary Kay, you still own it.
Yeah, I saw when I saw it with Mary Kay, I was like, this is so neat, because it looks like, like you'd wear like dance cards on your wrist.
Yeah, it's like a ribbon with the cards on it. That is so neat how they did that.
And kind of far away because of the coloring. Here's my phone dinging. It also reminds me of those yellow silk, is it tobacco silks? Those yellow,
cigar silks.
There we go.
Yeah,
that's kind of what it, she says she still has it. Yeah.
Very neat quilt. And it's interesting, so the other fundraiser quilt that's on page 59, that was a Episcopal church, but the yellow one is a Methodist church. And I always say the Methodists, they love to make these these fundraisers. And I'm not saying that other religions, other types of Protestant religions didn't make, or in other other faiths didn't make fundraising quilts, but man, the Methodists had it like on lockdown. They knew how to do this. There was something else. Oh, on page 58, before we finish this chapter up, where let's see, Margaret Blackman Davis, she just talks about when the quilt was almost finished, someone would say, looks like we're gonna have to shake the cat. And yes, we did that. Yeah. We used to bounce a cat on a finished quilt. I had heard about this before, and I'm like, what?
I was to check, the quilt's buoyancy. Like a good buoyant quilt is the one that's it. And I'm
like, the poor cat. My cats would, that would be the end of me if I tried something like that.
It's funny, on page 64, where there's this large picture here with all different kinds of examples of things. The pattern in the back left, top left corner, with the two ladies, the dress pattern, that reminds me of the pattern that you use on your stream when someone subscribes and the ladies start dancing.
Yeah, that one is, I believe that's an 80s outfit, but yes, it's two women, is definitely similar coloring. And yeah, the one lady.
Yeah, I kind of had to do a bit of a double take when
yeah, that is one of my favorite things in the world. I wondered, who is this woman that they have modeling? I'm assuming that is this Rutledge? I'm assuming maybe Rutledge got this model to model these things. Or is this somebody that Mary Kay conscripted? But let's see. Yeah, so this on page 64 at the bottom here is when it has the bag manufacturers, put the instructions for getting the ink out. And the problem was in Jenny Hall's quilt that all the print was gone except for the instructions on how to remove the ink.
Mary Kay just said that this woman was her their photo assistant.
Ah, okay. I'm sure she was like, sure, I'll put on a feed sack dress and apron.
I mean, she really kind of looks like she belongs.
Yeah, she's got that. Yeah, she definitely has that sense of I made my own dress out of feed sacks kind of pride.
Apparently Mary Kay pointed out that she was small enough to wear the carpet.
Dress would fit her. Yes. Yeah. The impoverished and tiny scrawny women of the 40s.
Yeah, she said she was perfect. And then to remind people too, because Stephanie and I were talking about it earlier, that we, you know, still have to finish our sack project of using antique or vintage methods of removing. And I had this bottom paragraph here about removing and having it printed on a feed sack. That was brand new news to me, because in terms of finding the recipes that we were planning to use to remove ours, Steph was the one finding them, and I'm like, did you know about this?
Yeah, and the instructions, if I remember correctly, I'll have to pull out my feed sack book, the Lindsay Cray Harris, I think is her name. I know her first name's Lindsay. That wrote the feed sack book for uppercase. Is very good, and I think she has pictures of the instructions. They're not as exciting as you think. They're things like soak it in, I don't know, washing soda or something like that. It's not like, well, get out your gasoline. It's not that exciting. It's more about like soaking and blotting and bleaching and stuff. It's, if I remember correctly.
Just for anyone that was wondering, we're discussing doing it next month and finally like planning.
It's only taken us a year and a few months. So
no, we started in April.
Did we? Well, we started talking about it last year at seminars when we started talking
about it and trying to do it. It's just our biggest problem in April is that Stephanie didn't read the instructions beforehand and didn't realize we had to soak something for 24 hours and we were leaving like the next day. So,
yeah, I kind of just thought you could like just drench it in kerosene, but no, you actually have to soak it. So
yeah.
I love on page 66 the stories about
oh my god,
underwear.
Okay, I have this mark to read out loud. Can I read it?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is talking about using sacks for all different kinds of things, not just quilts. And it said, women sitting around a quilting frame love to tell stories, some of which get a bit risque. Billy Crumley of Geraldine, Alabama, reconstructed such a story session for a tape recording she calls Quilt Stories of the 1930s. Several stories are about humorous incidents involving underwear made of sacks. One young girl was out walking with her beau when she tripped and fell. Oh, how embarrassed she was when her betrothed noticed her underwears imprinted with the words Southern Best. Another story was about a woman who made her husband's drawers from a flour sack and left the words self-rising on the cloth.
And you absolutely know she didn't try to get that out because she was a clown like we are. She was like, ha, 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 I got one for you, buddy. I love that. That was so funny. That was so good.
Yeah. Touche Mary Kay for putting that one in.
I know that was a really good one. By the way, I actually have I was gifted a flour sack. You know, a big one like one of these that has the print, you know, the logo printing on it, and it was suggested that I could do something similar with it like this, and I will.
Oh.
Because it is a sunbonnet Sue-ish situation.
Oh, and that one. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's very, very faded, so I think it'll be really cool to like, you know, retrace and embroider those outlines. It'll be really neat. So
yeah,
did my stack of things.
I was just gonna ask if you were gonna embroider or maybe like do fabric painting or something like that.
Yeah, definitely embroidery, because I really like how this quilt and And I was thinking, I actually have been collecting like dish towels and things to make myself a quilt. And I thought that would
I
be
believe
really
I
cool to
delivered 2 more to you recently from someone.
Oh yes, 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 yes. The little Dutch people, yes. So I thought that would be something cool to have in the center, you know, that like a stitched,
Yeah,
you know, and then have some of these dish towels. Anyway,
that would be very cute.
yeah.
Report back, get it done fast, because you know you've only got 6 months before the contest here, and we
Yeah,
gotta
I
get
only
it
have
done.
72 projects to do before then.
On page 68, the examples here, 94 and 96 of these like printed quilt blocks on the back of sacks. I have never come across these in my antique perusaling.
Yeah, I have never seen something like this out in the wild, but I knew from this book, and then there was another book, I think it might have actually been the uppercase feedsack book that they talked about this, and they had pictures of different things. Excuse me, the little dolls, you know, the little cut and sew dolls were really popular. Yeah, and so yeah, this other stuff.
Yeah, I'm just
the quilt
wondering, like,
pieces.
were these, well, I'm wondering a couple of things. First of all, let's see, pillow and quilt design, cut squares on dotted lines, sew dotted lines on figure with embroidery floss. So one thing I was wondering is, could I potentially have seen these things, but they're embroidered so that
You think it's just like a stamped quilt kind
embroidery
of
kit,
thing?
yeah.
Could be. Yeah, could be.
But when I'm looking at this, I'm not sure really that I've seen these patterns, period. Like
Yeah, these don't
even
look familiar to me, so.
So yeah, I'm also just wondering, like, well, let's see, the Shawnee is from Oklahoma, and then the other one's from Louisiana. So that might have something to do with why I'm not very much seeing stuff like that up here.
Yeah.
But they're really cool, and I want one.
Yeah, I mean, I think regionally, definitely. I mean, what I've read about the flour sack printing, and again, I've looked at it more from the cut and sew, because that was kind of my interest about flour sacks and feed sacks, was the cut and sew stuffed animals and dolls and things. But yeah, they all like they regionally did different things, and they would try stuff out, and sometimes it was only for a very short period of time that they produced some of this stuff. So it could be like you're saying, it's regional. Nothing's made it to your area, but I think it's also like there may not be a lot of them, because they would try stuff out. And like,
well, I can definitely admit that part of the problem too is that I never thought to check the back of ones that I like am looking at. So I'm gonna have to be,
well, now you know.
Yeah, because I definitely like won't learn.
I do have to say though, to throw it out there, Bemis, I think that's how it's pronounced, BEMIS. They were one of the big bag manufacturers, and
I see
the
them a
mills.
lot.
Yes, they're very popular, but they kind of I mean, obviously they weren't the first, they weren't the only, but they pioneered a lot of stuff. And I've kind of had my eye out for a Bemis bag with the cat. They have this cat, the Bemis cat, and it's like a tabby.
Not sure if
and sometimes it's a little scary looking, but I'll pull out my feet sacks book and I'll take a picture of it. I'll take a scan of it. But yeah, that's one I've kind of, you asked me a while back, like, is there anything on your wish list, your unicorn, your white whale? I would think a decent condition Bemis bag with a cat on it would be maybe one of my white whales. We'll see.
Well, I mean, that's good to know. That's good to know. I feel like I have, you know, when I have my list of friends and clients looking for things, and I go to a show and someone's like, are you looking for anything in particular? And I, you know, take out like this Harry Potter roll that just like rolls all the way out the door and a mile down the road.
So Viola Webb, I know that Mary Kay said she wanted to read some stuff. So I don't know how much we want to talk about Viola. I love this interview. Like, you know, I can almost hear her voice, you know.
I can too, yeah.
As I read these
and
things,
her like intonation.
Yeah, and it's just the picture of her. Oh, she's like a sweet lady.
Part of it for me too that probably makes it easy to kind of hear the conversation happen is we already know kind of what Mary Kay sounds like and asking questions and things, and then can envision that conversation happen. But yes, we were yes, she is like the cutest lady.
She is so quick. And I love the things she says, I mean, they're not exactly like the vernacular of some of my relatives, but it's kind of that same little, like, they have these terms where one example is Mary Kay is saying, so like basically you got your patterns, and she says, when I saw a picture, I'd see it and then I'd go to whittling on it. And Mary Kay says, go to whittling on it. I like that. And she says, make me a pattern, cut a pattern. So I just thought that was so cute. And yeah.
So our thought for everyone watching is maybe we save more discussion about this particular interview for Mary Kay's interview, and she can talk to us more about
tell us more about Viola and some of these ladies. I just I wish that I have one of my great regrets is that when some of my older relatives were still alive, that I wasn't able to take the time, or I didn't think to take the time with them to kind of have these kind of conversations. And I did do this stuff with my grandmother, but it's like, it's never enough, they're gone too soon. So there was something else that I'm looking for here that oh well, maybe I didn't mark it, whatever I'm thinking of. I do have to say, Viola's Drunkard's Path, pretty sweet.
I also think that her baskets quilt is pretty awesome too, and I have one just like it.
Yeah, the baskets one is very pretty. My mom loves baskets, and I think I'm always drawn to them.
Yes, she does.
I'm always drawn to them for that reason, because I can picture.
She has loved at least one basket that I have sold.
Well, yes, the basket quilt that I was like, you should just go ahead and buy this because I want it. You can enjoy it for your lifetime, and I will be waiting for it in the will.
I was gonna say, is your husband gonna be really upset when eventually you like come home from cleaning some things out of a crap closet and 50 quilts come rolling in the house?
Yeah, I will have to get another unit. I'll have to get a larger unit for all the quilts when my mother's quilts come.
Well, luckily we stayed pretty close to time tonight. So just to remind everybody, for next week, we're gonna finish this book, Looking for Better Times conclusion, and then make sure that you like spend a little time in things like the appendix and the glossary, and definitely like always the bibliography is a phenomenal place to look at stuff. Mary Kay just said, this is a great little note to end on here. She said, you've brought back some memories of special times, and she says she loves our take on it.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm glad. It seems to me that this was probably a fun book to write, and she had told us, and I can't remember how much of this, we sort of read her notes, but I think I remember you talking about like why she saw the need for this book after writing her the first book that she wrote with Bets.
Yep.
And this was the one that she'd authored her on her own. And it just seems like it was fun. It was fun. It was a fun project to do, to find this stuff and to talk to the ladies that, at the time were still alive that had made quilts during this time period.
Well, and you just reminded me of a little point that she made in her notes to us here. She said, I think you can see how I tried hard to get a quilt, the pattern source, and the quilt maker's photo, a material study method.
Yes, material culture study. Yes. I love that. Yeah.
So so I think this is a good place to call it a night. So our next book night is the 24th, and remember, like, we have our schedule up on our social media accounts, so make sure that you're with us on Facebook and on Instagram, just so you can keep abreast of things. I will update the description after we're done here with stuff for our next book and other things going on, and come back tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah,
because we're gonna do needlework nights, and wow, it's a lot going on this week.
Yeah, just when we thought, we're gonna ease back in. It's we've created so many deadlines for ourselves.
Yeah, because we just love working under pressure. And also, like, thank you so much, Mary Kay, for
Thank you.
being in my cell phone for the evening. It's any way that you want to participate is A-okay with us.
Well, and we totally appreciate Mary Kay. Like, you didn't have to say yes. Like we were say yes, but you didn't have to say yes. And we so appreciate that you did. And I'm glad that this is bringing back memories of good times for you. So,
yeah.
yeah.
Thanks everybody so much for joining us tonight. Arlene, my dear, it's lovely to see you. It's been a while. I feel like I haven't seen you.
Yeah. You've been busy. Back to school time, right?
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, hopefully we'll see you tomorrow or on Thursday, my regular stream. And yeah, we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.